Yes. So let's start with our focus statement, shall we? I think it's going to be up here on the screen, and it's going to be right over there on the wall there for you. This is what we affirm every week here at Riverside Center for Spiritual Living. So with all the V's, vim, vivaciousness, voluptuousness, velocity, vibrancy, all of it. All right, here we go. We embolden people to live their highest potential through the transformative power of love. Yes, we embolden people to live their highest potential through the transformative power of love. Woo, we've had some power of love already flowing in here this morning. I'm so excited. You have no idea. Oh my God. Well, maybe you do. So this year here at Centers for Spiritual Living, we are working with the theme of 2020 Spiritual Vision. And I know several of you have your journals already. I believe there's still a few more in the bookstore if you want to pick those up. It's not too late. But we're working with that theme of 2020 Spiritual Vision. As I mentioned earlier, when our young people were here, what we're working with, the theme that we're working with this whole month is honoring the divine feminine. Honoring the divine feminine. Because this month is International Women's Month, and next Sunday is International Women's Day. So women get Euro month too. Woohoo! It's always every month, right? So regardless of what month we choose to label it, it's always every month. So what we're talking about today, I love this picture, Michelle. This picture is from the Mission Inn. You'll have to go find it, but it is reminiscent of the goddess there, if you notice there. And so today's topic is the Holy Reimagined. The Holy Reimagined. So we believe here that words have power, yes? That language has power, correct? All right, so let's break this down a little bit right off the top. So if we look at holy, and we think of holy as being sacred, right? Yeah, okay. But then there's another way. If you put a W in front of that, then it's holy, meaning completely, right? Fully, entirely. And if we look at holy from that perspective, and then we look at the word whole, right? That means complete, and it also means one. Right? So if we look at this, then we can approach it from a oneness, a sense of that perspective. Would you agree? There's the holy, it's one, right? And then reimagined. If we're going to imagine something, we're going to create an image of it in our own minds or in our own thoughts or in our own beliefs, would you say? If you're imagining, you're creating an idea. You're creating a thought. Well, what do we know happens if we create ideas and we create thoughts? What happens? Right. I was like, where are my people? They manifest, right? When we put our thoughts, when we put our beliefs behind something, when we believe as, right, to the degree that we believe, and in the moment that we believe completely, to that degree, we experience that which we imagine, that which we believe, that which we know to be truth, or that which we know we want to experience. So if we're talking about the holy reimagined, then what we're looking at is we're looking at the wholeness and the allness and the creation and thinking about it in a whole new, or not necessarily new, but a different way than what we may be accustomed to, right? So continuing on with this idea of words, did you know there are almost 7,000 languages in the world? 7,000 languages, right? Wow, right? That's a lot. 7,000. So if our words and our language have meaning and have power, then don't also our words and our language have influence as to how we think, as to what we believe, as to what we affirm, right? And if there are 7,000 languages, there are 7,000 ways of expressing or looking at or viewing the universe. Whoa. Right? And if you think of 7 billion people, then there's 7 billion individualizations of the one, right? But if you think of just language itself and how language and words shape our thoughts and shape our ideas and shape what it is that we believe, and not only do they shape what it is that we believe and how we express, but then they shape how we outpicture and how we express things and the way we view the world, right? So an easy example or a quick example of this might be looking at the sun and the moon. In English, we go the sun, the moon. There is no gender to it. It's just the sun, the moon, right? However, in other languages, what we look at, or the way they use language, is they have masculine and feminine, even in the languaging, right? So, for example, in Spanish, the sun is male, and the moon is female. Whereas in German, the sun is female, and the moon is male. And what we find is that in warmer climates, the sun tends to be male, and the moon tends to be female, because then the moon also coincides with the tides. It also coincides with the tides of a woman's body, and it coincides with the flow, right? Whereas the sun is bringing heat, and a lot of heat, and it's hot, and so it feels more aggressive or more assertive. It's necessary, but it has a different energy to it, right? Whereas in the northern climes, the sun's warmth is that warm, nurturing, cozy mother energy, right? In Scandinavia with Freya. Right? It's a warmth, it's a cozy energy, whereas the moon is more of a cool energy. Right? Cool. Yeah, just like cool. Right? Maybe. We'll give that to you. Right? So it's interesting how then when we talk about things in different languages, how we then describe them. We describe them, or we assign them feminine attributes or masculine attributes. So the sun is beautiful and shining and silver and iridescent, right, if it's feminine. Whereas the sun is hot and assertive and oppressive, or any of these other words that we might use. Whereas in German it would be, or in Scandinavian countries, it'd be the warmth and the loving embrace of the sun, who is the giver of life. Right? Fascinating, isn't it? Our perspective on how we use this language that we have and use these different languages that we have to express different ideas and different thoughts, and then our perspectives on things. Another example that's an interesting example is if somebody knocked over a vase. Right? In English, we might say, he knocked over the vase. The vase broke. Right? He knocked over the vase. Whereas in Spanish, it would be, the vase was knocked over. Right? And so then what is our perspective? When we remember the event, it's the same event. When we remember the event, it's like, I'm assigning blame. He knocked over the vase. Whereas the other way is like, the vase was knocked over, so the remembrance is, there was an accident, but not necessarily who caused the vase to be knocked over. Interesting perspective, isn't it? Would you agree, Livier? Okay. Right, so it's a different perspective, it's a different way of seeing things, a different way of viewing life, a different way of experiencing life, and a different way of walking through life. So when we come down to this idea of masculine and feminine, and the divine feminine and the divine masculine, when we look at, let's go to the Christian Bible or the Hebrew Bible, back in the day, there were 3 words for God that were used, especially in the Genesis story. There's El, there's Eloah, and then there's Elohim. El is masculine for God, Eloah is feminine for God, and Elohim is plural for God. Right? Interesting. And which one was it that created Humans in their image and likeness? Elohim. They created humans in their image and likeness. And then when you think about it and how our English language is evolving right now too, there's the singular they, isn't there? The non-gender they. The non-binary they, the singular they, right? And wow, think about that. That God, the divine, the goddess, might not even have a gender, or encompasses both genders, or encompasses all genders. Because what do we know? How many is there? There's only one. There's only one divine presence expressing itself in, through, and as all of creation, all of life, and each one of us is an individualized expression of this one life. Whether we show up in physical form as male or female or trans or non-binary or however we identify our gender, there's still only this one expressing itself as each one of us. Amazing, isn't it? To be thinking about it in those terms. So if we're going to think about it, we think that we come to realize that the divine is all attributes that we assign it. And that actually we assign whether those attributes are male energy or female energy, right? But what we know is that it's just energy. What we know is that it's just love, it's just the power, it's just the presence, it's just abundance, it's just freedom, it's just peace, it's just poise, it's just joy. And none of those things, none of those qualities or attributes have a gender assigned to them. They just are, because the divine just is. Isn't that a different way of experiencing the divine? And what I know is that we come into this room and into this group of people, into our faith and philosophy here at Centers for Spiritual Living, and it seems like a radical idea. All of a sudden you hear the divine being called it, rather than he or she. It's like, wow, that's kind of radical. That's kind of, whoa, right? That's different. But if we recognize that there's only one, how could it be anything other than the one? Yes? So I'd like to reimagine, if you will. Let's think about some of the stories that we may have grown up with when we were kids. What if the divine feminine, what if goddess, brought forth Eve first? What if it was one of Eve's ribs that was removed? And last time I checked, all women have 12 ribs just like men do, so I don't know. But at any rate, what if it was one of Eve's ribs that were removed? Right? What if it was Adam who met the snake? What if it was Adam that said, "Hey, Eve, you want an apple?" Just a little bite. Think of the trajectory where we would be right now in the United States in this moment if that story was the creation story. Because whether we identify as Christian or not, we all agree that it's the year 2020. Yeah, right. So, what if Moses had been a woman and freeing all the people in Egypt and escorting them back to the promised land? What if Moses had been a woman? Well, I can guarantee you one thing. They wouldn't have been lost for 40 years because she would have stopped and asked directions. I'm just saying. Excuse me, see the million people here? Yeah, we're trying to get here. We're, you know, and the 7-Eleven gas station attendant, oh yeah, you just take a left here and then there you go. Right. How different would it be, right? One of the most interesting things that I find is the way that we have so forgotten the divine feminine in the teachings, even of the Judeo-Christian teachings, that we've so forgotten the divine feminine. Because when you look at what it was that Jesus, the master teacher, was teaching, he was teaching love, he was teaching compassion, right? He was teaching listening to your higher self, listening to spirit. He was teaching a oneness and a wholeness and just a ginormous love, right? And that was radical. Radical. And it's still radical today. It was just a radical thought. You mean come from love, come from compassion? You mean come from forgiveness? Why would I do that? Right? Because somewhere along the line, what happened is language got in the way, right? That it became that it was God, the masculine form of God, the masculine, that then got associated with masculine, that then got associated with the Old Testament version, perhaps, or the First Testament version, perhaps, of the sky god, the thunder god, the war god, the god of judgment, the god of pointing fingers, right? The god of retribution, of justice and judgment, right? And somehow that became the God, and then there's the confusion. It's like, but how can God be that, and then God be love? And I don't understand, and I'm having cognitive dissonance, and then what do I do? Where do I go? Because we so hyper-masculinized the one, and we simply allowed the divine feminine, what we assign to the divine feminine, those qualities of love and compassion and patience, we allow that to fall aside. And as life continued to unfold through the ages, anything that was not like this hyper-masculinized God was then deemed this over-sexualized female, and then she had to be put in her place. And then we pushed her aside. And so we still are living in this patriarchy, this colonial way of thinking, this conquering way of thinking even today. And so we have the opportunity now, and we're beginning to see it even more so now, of bringing the divine feminine, the ideas of the divine feminine, back to begin to create the balance. Yes? We see it with our non-binary folk coming forward, right? We see it in the world as a whole. We see it in the Me Too movement. We see it in the Women's March movement. We see more and more women entering into business and politics and life and bringing a different kind of balance where there still is, yes, the assertive, but yet there is also this passion and compassion and love and understanding and a willingness to be open and hear and receive and work cooperatively with one another. We've seen it shift definitely in our business models. It's begun to shift. That authoritarian boss is, they're still hanging around, but they're on their way out. There's a new way. There's a collaborative way. That what we're seeing is we're seeing hierarchical structures begin to flatten. Yes? Because there's this more of a collaboration that's wanting to occur, that's wanting to emerge. This is coming from the divine feminine, knowing that we need to work together, not to be at odds with one another. Do we need the divine masculine, the sacred masculine? Absolutely, because it is the sacred masculine that kind of gives that spark, gives that, that next leap, if you will. In Indian culture, in Hindu culture, in Hinduism, we have the god Shiva and the goddess Shakti. And Shiva is male and Shakti is female. And the way it's looked upon is that Shiva is life, and Shiva is consciousness, and Shakti is energy, and Shakti is what allows consciousness to take form. Right? The energy that allows consciousness to take form. So if we think of our teaching symbol as well, Ernest Holmes described it at the top is spirit, which is, he describes it as the divine masculine. It's the idea, it's the consciousness, that then is planted into the center there, the law, the womb, if you will, the creative medium that knows how to bring that consciousness forth into form. And then the bottom is form. Right? So we see that even here in our own philosophy and our own teaching. We see how the masculine and the feminine are all part of one, because there's that whole circle there, yes? That there really is no division between the two. These are just attributes that we've chosen to assign to them. So what I invite us to do this month, and as we move forward, I invite us to really tap into the divine feminine in how that expresses in, through, and as you. Because guys, we have the divine feminine within us as well. All right? Already doing it. Yes. Love it. Right? So I invite you to really look and see and explore how we can bring the divine feminine forward. Because those principles that we've assigned to the divine feminine are exactly what's right there. It's the transformative power of love. It's birthing a new idea. It's birthing that idea of a world that works for everyone in all of creation. Because if we keep going the way we have been, we're not going to get anywhere. We have the opportunity to really go within, turn within, and bring forth that love and that compassion, the nurturing, the intuition, and allow that to guide, allow that to lead. How wonderful would that be? Think of, like I said it earlier, what would it look like if Goddess had brought forth Eve first? What would it look like if Paul had stepped aside and allowed the teachings of Jesus himself to expand? What might that have looked like? Where might we be in 2020? How might our lives be in 2020? Well, you know what? You have the power of your mind. You can reimagine the holy. You can reimagine what it would look like. Because when we imagine, when we catch that glimpse, when we catch that image, then we begin creating that image. When we form it and we believe it, then we bring it forth. That is what we teach here. So to be what that goddess principle, that goddess energy, each one of us has the power and the presence to do that. Each one of us has the ability to change the way we walk in the world and thereby changing the world itself. So I invite you, allow your inner diva out. Let her come out and play. Are you with me? Yes. All right. I know Amber is. She's like, ooh, yep. And so it is. Blessings.